Welcome to Guyarawi, a 24-hour online #Oromo protest campaign. We want to welcome you to our panel discussion. Our panel consists of myself and the incredible Bijiga, who will introduce himself in a moment. But before we start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet in our respective lands in Melbourne, Australia. We pay our respects to the Aboriginal elders, past, present, and emerging. And we are so honoured to be on this land. So I think it's a very good culture to really acknowledge the traditional owners. So my name is Urge. I am from Melbourne. With me today, I've got Bijiga. Bijiga, do you want to tell us just a bit about yourself?
Yes, thanks for having me, Urge. My name is Bijiga Defa from Melbourne, Australia as well. I'm an engineer and my part-time job now is, I think we're all becoming some kind of activists by I guess, with our choice.
Yeah. Definitely. We all have to use our voices and whatever platforms we have. So thank you so much for joining us, Bijiga. I just want to encourage everyone just to engage in the conversations that are happening on Twitter right now. So please, if you don't have a Twitter account, please sign up. Just visit www.twitter.com and you can create an account, and there'll be a lot of information online about how you can be involved in #Oromo protests with an S. All right, so today we are going to be talking about a very interesting, I guess, topic that has been a very popular point of discussion for a lot of people. Was Prime Minister Abiy, was he noble enough to win the Nobel Peace Prize in 2019? And this has been, I guess there have been many online debates and discussions, change.org petitions about this very topic. And hopefully we can just have a bit more of a discussion in light of what we have seen transpire over the months following his, award. So just to give people some context, the Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to Prime Minister Abiy in 2019 for his quote-unquote efforts to achieve peace and international cooperation, and in particular for his decisive initiative to resolve the border conflict with neighboring Eritrea. But I guess what we're going to be talking about today is, was he actually really noble enough to win that very coveted award? Or was this really a premature political gesture motivated by controlling the region or even self-ambition? So we're going to kind of talk a little bit about that. And I thought before we kind of get into it, I really do want to put out a disclaimer that these, what we're going to be discussing through the course of this conversation is really our personal opinions and our thoughts and our perspectives, and it's not representative of the various platforms that this will be streamed from or of any other group or entity. So I just want to put that disclaimer out there. So are you ready to jump in?
Let's do it.
All right. So I guess like one of the questions I have for you is, when you think of Nobel Peace Prize, what sort of comes to your mind?
I think one particular quality that comes to mind is leadership. Somebody who's a leader, what comes to mind is leaders like Nelson Mandela, Desmond Tutu, people who were able to unite people from opposing ends and actually move the country forward. So somebody with integrity, somebody who can be trusted, that's what comes to mind. I don't think we can say that for Abiy Ahmed.
Yeah. So interesting you say that, because I've been kind of mulling over it. So for those of you that don't know what the Nobel Peace Prize is, so it's one of 5 Nobel Prizes that was established by the will of Swedish industrialist, inventor, Alfred Nobel, along with the prizes in chemistry, physics, medicine, literature. It's a very coveted and prestigious award, and like Bijiga was saying, is awarded to people that have really made significant strides in different industries or in different sort of areas. But when I was thinking about this question, I actually thought the same things as you. I thought people that have made a really positive impact in the world. But more and more, I think when I started to think about like, well, what comes to mind is I also start to think about all the people that have been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, but have then since, information has come to light about the various gross human rights violations that they've either been involved in or complicit of. And what that then means in terms of how we hold that person's sort of, the impact that they've had versus actually what the reality is about their leadership. And so it's sort of tainted. Like I think of people like Aung San Suu Kyi, who for a very long time has been considered a human rights activist for her people, and then more recently has been shrouded by controversy about her really being complicit about the injustices of various groups, minority groups. So yeah, I'm kind of torn between the kind of idealistic view of the prize versus like how tainted it's sort of become in some instances.
Yes, I think in recent years the prize has come into disrepute. Like leaders you mentioned, like Aung San Suu Kyi and now Abiy Ahmed, they've actually taken the prestige away from the prize. I think the prize was awarded way too early before these leaders were actually tested in leadership position over a long time, and now that's actually risking the prestige that actually the prize represents. So that's really a risk, and I think that will become more apparent in the coming months and years.
Yeah, so interesting you say that, because for Prime Minister Abiy, he actually was he received this maybe approximately 9 months from his appointment in his leadership. And so like comparatively to a lot of other people that have been awarded this coveted prize, who have for decades been demonstrating leadership in various areas, it just seems quite premature, and it does make one think that there are other motivations at play. Would you sort of agree with that, or?
Yes, I would actually agree with that. For example, for prizes such as physics and medicine, when somebody actually, I guess, produces material that is useful to mankind, or a new information or new knowledge, that is actually tested over decades, and peer-reviewed in a peer-reviewed journal before that actual prize is awarded. So I think that same standard needs to apply when, I guess, awarding the Nobel Peace Prize. Otherwise, this prize will be, I guess, brought into question, and reputation that would be damaged beyond repair. So I think it's definitely premature. It's definitely controversial, more now than in the past. And I think given where Ethiopia is and what Abiy Ahmed has done, especially in the last 6 to 12 months, is really going to focus the spotlight on Abiy Ahmed. And this actual prize would actually, I guess, is a double-edged. So what happens is now, because of this prize, people actually pay attention because the expectation is so high. Yeah. And then when they don't deliver this expectation, people will be saying, wait a minute, what is this guy doing? We just gave him the Nobel Peace Prize. He is expected to have higher standards. He was supposed to usher in democracy, reform, and widening the political process. Well, we've actually seen, in fact, his reversal of all those and erosion of what little, I guess, opening there was. So this is really going to bring his actions into spotlight.
Yeah, because even in his in I guess the communication and decision to award him this coveted award. It was very aspirational in its kind of in its sort of the way it was pitched. It was really about the kind of leadership that he would be demonstrating and that he would be delivering on. It wasn't so much a reflection or a legacy type leadership that he has engaged in, obviously because he had been appointed roughly 9 months from when he received this award. So in a sense there was sort of an anticipation and a very aspirational sort of discourse around the award that he received, which is quite interesting given all of the other people that have received this award.
I think that's actually a very interesting point you brought up, Jorge. The Nobel Committee actually referred to it and made mention of the aspirational aspect of this award. So it's not actually for his achievement that is given this award. It is more for, I guess, what they hope he will do in the future. And all of that is now coming into light. So I think the Nobel Committee need to really think hard and well in the future to avoid this kind of issues and to minimize the dispute to the award.
Yeah. All right. So I guess like we've sort of touched on this a little bit, but is there anything else that you want to say about, I guess, what led to Abiy's sort of being awarded this prestigious award? What do you think kind of got him to that point?
I think that is really the important question. The main point that the Nobel Committee referenced was for ending the border war between Ethiopia and Eritrea. So this is really interesting, and this was again another premature assessment from our perspective. What's happened was this particular war actually materially on the ground, nothing has happened to date. What's happened is basically an announcement of the peace deal, and then there was some gesture travel between Asmara and Addis Ababa, and that was supposed to be what is going to bring the peace. In fact, what's happened is very what I would call things for show. So what they've done is they've opened the border for a very short time. They started a two-way trade. Within months, the border was actually closed. The trade stopped, and actually any little gain that was made is actually reversed. The other important point here is the main war is between TPLF and Eritrea. These two parties are still on war footing. Nothing has changed. The border demarcation hasn't taken place. Ethiopia has left the battle area of Badame. So what actually happened is nothing tangible is happening on the ground. So this is really extremely premature to use that as a basis to award this prize. I think, in fact, what Abiy Ahmed did is it's not what is done in relation to ending the war is not for actual desire and need of peace. I think it was a strategic decision to eliminate one of his opponents from Tigray, which are the TPLF, to minimize the risks they bring to his leadership. By siding with Eritrea, he was actually trying to neutralize the TPLF. So, in fact, what Abiy's done is it's a political move to strengthen his power as opposed to actually trying to deliver peace between the two countries. So that's really interesting. People really need to pay attention to this now.
Yeah. So interesting. Well, like there would be others that would say, well, he didn't award this prestigious honor upon himself, that there would be there's others that are nominating him, that there's due process within the Nobel Prize Committee, and there's oversight as to how people meet certain criteria. I guess in light of what you've described as what has sort of led him to this point, and what were the things that sort of played into him receiving this award. What would you say to the people that would say to you, well, it's, you know, there's a process in place, and he, you know, got the award fair, you know, through a fair process, I guess?
I think a lot of people will probably make this argument, but the problem is process do break down, and they're man-made, and people that are involved in that process actually do make biased decisions for whatever reason. So I think what we're seeing now actually makes that very clear. So instead of actually what you expect from a Nobel Peace Prize winner is somebody who's very democratic, who is holding elections, who is opening up the political field, who has free and fair election and free media. What we've done from Abiy Ahmed is actually none of the above. He's eroding away what little, I guess, safeguards were in place. Now we have all key opposition figures in jail. We've got media being shut down. We've got mass arrest. We've got a de facto command post. So I don't know how you can associate this with recipient of a Nobel Peace Prize. So this is really going to be raising a lot of questions for the people who made this decision. And I think they'll be thinking hard for the future years.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say in future years, because what we've seen to date is that, to my knowledge, no one that has received this coveted award has been stripped of this award. And they have sort of really strict, I guess, rules around, you know, once someone has been awarded these awards, then, you know, they're not stripped because it's based on a particular point in time, the achievements that person has made. So it's quite interesting, because I guess critics have said that the Nobel Peace Prize has been shrouded in, sort of politically motivated ways. And I think what we've seen with Abiy is that the sort of vanity projects that he was involved in his first 100 days as Prime Minister, the very superficial sort of reformist kind of activities, have led perhaps the international world, to think that, wow, here's this reformist leader in what people believe to be one of the fastest growing economies in Africa. And on paper, it looks like this fairy tale. And then when you look at the institute that is the Nobel Peace Committee, you know, there are times in which those decisions are made, and they're made for political, you know, motivations, and there are sort of other drivers to those decisions.
Yeah, I mean, these days, every aspect of the world is becoming politicized. So I wouldn't be surprised if this has element of political involvement from various parties. And going back to your point about this glitter project that Abiy is known for, I think he's conned everyone, myself included. When he first came to power, I was one of his supporters. I used to advocate for him and think he was doing a fantastic job. But when you start to look hard, and then when obviously hindsight is a beautiful thing, and what we see now, it's not surprising. So I think a lot of people feel conned when it comes to Abiy Ahmed and what he's done and what he's doing. And the Nobel Committee would be really scratching their head as to how they've got themselves into this situation. So, I mean, I know this prize has never been revoked in the past. I know their policies not to revoke. I wouldn't be surprised if Abiy Ahmed is stripped of this prize. It's really controversial what he's doing in Ethiopia now. Ethiopia is on the brink of civil war. Instead of uniting and calming the nation, he's basically polarizing and basically putting various ethnic groups towards, I guess, one another. And it's really dangerous. And Ethiopia is in a very difficult situation at the moment. So, yes.
Yeah, no, I agree with what you've said. I'm really glad that we're, able to have these discussions and really, like you said, hindsight is 2020, and it's a great opportunity for all of us to use this time to really reflect and think about the things that have occurred over the last few years, particularly over the last, few weeks. And I think it's a real time for us to think critically, and to really see things for what, for what they are really. And that's what this conversation is about. I just want to encourage all of our viewers that are watching this panel to please engage in the conversation that's happening on Twitter right now. So just hashtag Oromo protests, and you can join in the conversation. We encourage everyone to write to their members of parliament or Congress person, depending on wherever you are around the world, in the US, in Europe, everywhere really. So thank you so much for joining us. We're having a discussion today about whether Abiy was really noble enough to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. And so Bijiga is joining us today to have this discussion. I was just going to ask you, in relation to, I guess, what the catalyst for this award, this so-called sort of peace deal with Eritrea, where is that at now? I know that you touched on that, but what kind of impact or what kind of message does that send to the world, given what we know now?
I think what that actually hasn't moved at all. I think one of the special aspects of this award is by giving this award to Abiy Ahmed, I think the Nobel Committee was also encouraging Isaias Afewerki from Eritrea to also start opening up the political landscape. And what we've seen is nothing's happened on that front whatsoever. So Eritrea is still this closed-off country with a lot of people in prison, no election, no free media, and we've got a dictator in basically in power. And Abiy is, I think, emulating that role as well.
Yeah.
Also, adding to this is, sorry, Jorge, I think one of the key thing is when Abiy Ahmed made this announcement of ending the war with Eritrea, is that Ethiopia would accept the actual United Nations, resolution and decision, and accept and implement those outcomes. And what we've seen is none of that's happened. So what's one of the key requirements? The war actually happened because of a dispute over a land, over a border. Ethiopia is still occupying this land. There hasn't been any demarcation. There hasn't been any moving. Those two sides are still on war footing. The TPLF, which was actually the main adversaries between Eritrea and Ethiopia, is still considers Eritrea to be an enemy, and they consider themselves on a war footing. So nothing literally has happened on the ground. So a lot of people actually fear war would break out anytime soon with any miscalculation, because TPLF is on a back foot at the moment, and any number of things could trigger off conflict.
Yeah. So I guess with that being the backdrop, with what we know about, Abiy's leadership, particularly the volatile sort of environment that the Oromo find themselves in now, what can organizations like the Norwegian Nobel Institutes, the committee, can these organizations be trusted? Have they really done their due diligence in awarding him this prestigious award? And, being awarded such a prestigious award, like what kind of impact does that have on his image?
Yeah, I think if you ask the Nobel Committee right now, would they award the prize to Abiy Ahmed? The simple answer is no, because he doesn't meet any of those criteria. He would actually be more likely to be a candidate for a dictator rather than a recipient of a Nobel Peace Prize. So if we really look at Abiy Ahmed's record at the moment, especially over the last 6 months, he's shut down media, he's jailed journalists, he's shut down internet, he's imprisoned opposition leaders, and we've gone back to mass arrest and command post. I don't know how you can actually consider a leader in this scenario to be a recipient of a Nobel Peace Prize. So if this was basically reviewed again, the answer would be he would not receive this prize.
Yeah. And I guess just talking to that point around, well, how is he viewed? Like, I think, like you said, from the perspective of the Nobel Peace Committee, certainly you would think that they would think